The number staring back at me from my laptop screen might as well have been a gunshot. 347. 82. Our retirement account, once holding $278,000 of carefully invested savings, now held less than the cost of our last dinner date. My stomach clenched. As the room seemed to tilt around me, the familiar kitchen suddenly foreign territory. The money hadn't vanished. It had been transferred, deliberately, systematically, by the man who'd promised to build a life with me. I'm Emily Thompson, and I just discovered my husband of 12 years had emptied our future into someone else's hands while I was busy trying to save our marriage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started like any other Tuesday. I was preparing for a client presentation at Summit Marketing, juggling coffee and email responses when a notification from First National Bank appeared on my phone. Congratulations on your recent transaction. My eyebrows furrowed. I hadn't made any transactions recently. Mark handled most of our finances. It had been our arrangement for years while I focused on building my career at Summit. A casual division of responsibilities that now seemed like a catastrophic mistake. I clicked through to our online banking portal, expecting some minor transfer between accounts or perhaps an automatic investment. Instead, I found myself staring at the decimated balance of our primary retirement fund. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against the kitchen tile, hot liquid splashing my ankles. I barely noticed. 2 transfers had occurred in the past week. The first for $125,000 3 days ago, while I was in Chicago for a marketing conference. The second for $152,000 yesterday afternoon, while I was meeting with my largest client. Both authorized with Mark's credentials, both transferred to an account I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I dialed Mark's number, straight to voicemail. Mark, it's me. There's something wrong with our retirement account. Call me back immediately. My voice sounded unnervingly steady, a stark contrast to the earthquake happening inside me. I looked around our kitchen, the custom oak cabinets we'd installed last summer, the marble countertops Mark had insisted were worth the splurge, the expensive coffee maker he'd bought for my birthday. All paid for with our joint income. My income, actually, had covered most of it. As Summit's director of client strategy, I earned considerably more than Mark did at his financial advisory firm, Denver Financial Solutions. The signs had been there. They glared at me now with painful clarity as I navigated through our other accounts, finding each one depleted or emptied entirely. Mark volunteering to handle all our finances 3 years ago when I took on more responsibility at work. His new password protections on his phone. The weekend golf retreats with clients that had grown more frequent. The late nights at the Y office that I'd never questioned because financial advisors often worked unusual hours during tax season. I called Karen, my closest friend and colleague at Summit. Hey Em, aren't you supposed to be prepping for the Westridge presentation? She answered cheerfully. Mark emptied our retirement account, I blurted out. Almost $280,000. It's gone. What? The shock in Karen's voice mirrored my own internal state. Are you sure it's not some kind of mistake? Could your accounts have been hacked? No, it was authorized from his credentials. 2 separate transfers in the past week. Jesus, Emily, have you called the bank? Maybe they can reverse the transfers? That's my next call. I'm trying to reach Mark first. And he's not answering, Karen stated, rather than asked. The implication hung between us. I ended the call, with Karen promising to cover my presentation and headed upstairs to our home office. Mark's desk was neater than usual, another red flag I'd missed. Mark had never been organized before taking over our finances. The desk drawers yielded nothing unusual until I reached the bottom one. Hidden beneath hanging folders was a glossy real estate brochure for Mountain View Estates, an exclusive development of luxury cabins near Aspen. Several properties were circled, including a stunning 3-bedroom with panoramic mountain views listed at $1. $4 million. Across the top in Mark's handwriting, options for H&M. H&M, not E and M, for Emily and Mark. My knees weakened as I sank into the office chair. I flipped through the brochure and a business card fell out. Heather Brooks, Wellness. Coach and yoga instructor. On the back, in flowing handwriting. Can't wait to see our mountain sanctuary come to life. All my love, H. Heather. I knew her, or knew of her. Mark had mentioned her a few times. A client who ran yoga retreats. For corporate executives, he'd helped her with investment strategies for her growing business. Or so he'd said. Our mountain sanctuary. My fingers crumpled the edge of the glossy paper. I took a deep breath and called First National Bank, my voice surprisingly steady, as I explained the situation to the representative. I'm concerned about potentially fraudulent transfers from our joint retirement account. The customer service agent, Melissa, checked the details. Those transfers were authorized with the proper credentials and security questions, Mrs. Thompson. They went to an account at Mountain West Credit Union. Can you reverse the transfers? These were made without my knowledge or consent. I'm sorry, but since it's a joint account and your husband is an authorized user, we can't classify this as fraud. Both parties have equal rights to the funds. What about the fact that he transferred virtually all of it? Doesn't that seem suspicious? I understand your concern, but legally, either account holder can withdraw any amount. This would be considered a domestic dispute, not fraud. I hung up, anger replacing shock. Domestic dispute. Such a sanitized term for theft and betrayal. My phone chimed with a text from Mark. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Working late. With Heather, presumably, planning their mountain sanctuary with my retirement savings. I texted back, we need to talk about the $277,000 missing from our retirement account. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, don't know what you're talking about, account is fine. Liar. I pulled up our online banking app and took screenshots of the transfers, sending them to him without comment. No response for 5 long minutes. Then, there's been a misunderstanding. We'll talk tonight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A misunderstanding. As if $277,000 could accidentally fall into another woman's account. As if our mountain sanctuary could be written on a real estate brochure by mistake. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I logged into our other accounts, documenting everything. The pattern became clear. Mark had been moving smaller amounts over the past year, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, from various accounts, staying just below thresholds that would trigger notifications. The retirement account withdrawals were just the grand finale. As I assembled the evidence, a memory surfaced. My grandmother, sitting at her kitchen table when I was just 16, account books spread before her. Emily, she'd said, her voice firm with conviction. A smart woman always has her own money. Always. No matter how much you love someone. Grandma Alice had been an accountant in an era when women were expected to be secretaries at best. She'd survived the sudden death of my grandfather with dignity and security because she'd maintained her own financial independence. Her lesson had stayed with me, which was why, unknown to Mark, I'd maintained a separate account at Western Trust throughout our marriage. An account under my maiden name, where I'd deposited portions of my year-end bonuses, small inheritances, tax refunds, money that was technically ours but that Mark never missed because he didn't know the exact amounts. I opened my laptop and logged into Western Trust. The balance stood at $213,594. 68. Not enough to retire on, but more than enough to ensure I wouldn't be left destitute while fighting for what was rightfully mine. I picked up my phone and called James Rodriguez, a family law attorney recommended by Summit's legal team. "Mrs. Thompson, I can see you tomorrow at 10 a.m., his assistant offered, after I briefly explained my situation. "I'll be there," I confirmed, already planning what documents to bring. My next call was to the HR department at Summit. "I need to change the deposit information for my paychecks effective immediately," I instructed, redirecting my salary to my Western Trust account. The anger that had been building crystallized into something colder, more focused. Mark had stolen our future, but he had no idea what I was capable of. When my phone rang again, it was Karen. "Emily, are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "Actually, I need something else," I said, an idea forming. "Didn't your brother-in-law work in real estate development in Aspen?" "Tom, yeah, he's with Alpine Ventures. Why?" "Can you call him and ask what he knows about Mountain View Estates? I need to understand exactly what's happening with that development." "Of course, right away." After hanging up, I walked through our house with new eyes. The space that had once felt like a shared dream now felt like evidence of a life built on shifting sand. The photographs from our trip to Bali 2 years ago, Mark's arm around my shoulders as we smiled into the camera, the wedding portrait above the fireplace, both of us looking impossibly young and hopeful. Had any of it been real? I was still, standing there when my phone rang again. Karen, calling back with remarkable speed. "Tom had a lot to say about Mountain View Estates," she said without preamble. "It's a troubled development. The initial phase sold well, but they've had permitting issues with the second phase, the one with those premium Mountain View cabins. The developer, Alpine Summit Holdings, is in financial trouble and looking for investors who can put down substantial cash to secure properties before they're officially listed. Let me guess, buyers who can move quickly get a preferential price?" "Exactly. Tom says they're offering about 15% below what the market value will be, but only for buyers who can close within 30 days, all cash." All cash. That explained the urgency of Mark's transfers. "There's more," Karen continued. "Tom mentioned a financial advisor who's been bringing in clients to invest, Mark Thompson from Denver Financial Solutions. Apparently, he's been quite active with the development, showing properties regularly over the past few months." My stomach tightened. "Including to a yoga instructor named Heather Brooks?" Karen paused. "Tom didn't mention names, but he said one property, Cabin 14 with the best views, was being held specifically for Mark's special client, who was making a substantial down payment this week." "A substantial down payment? With my retirement savings. Does Tom know any of the real estate agents working with Mountain View Estates?" I asked, a plan beginning to crystallize in my mind. "Sure, his firm works with them regularly." "Why?" "What are you thinking, Emily?" "I think it's time I became an investor in Mountain View Estates myself." There was a pause before Karen spoke again, her voice cautious. I know you're hurting. Right now, but making financial decisions out of anger." "This isn't anger, Karen. This is strategy." I looked at the Mountain View Estates brochure again, studying the property map. Cabin 14 is Mark and Heather's dream home, purchased with my stolen retirement funds. I want to know which cabins surround it. Karen was silent for a moment. "I'll ask Tom to connect you with Sarah Martinez. She's the lead agent for the development." After hanging up, I sat in our kitchen, watching the afternoon light shift across the walls. Mark had underestimated me. He'd seen me as the workaholic wife, too busy with my career to notice his betrayal. What he didn't realize was that the same strategic thinking that had propelled me to Director of Client Strategy at Summit Marketing could be turned toward personal matters just as effectively. My phone buzzed with another text from Mark. "Heading home now. We need to talk." I didn't respond. Let him wonder what I knew. what evidence I'd gathered, what plans I was making. By the time the front door opened, I had composed myself. I sat at the dining room table, laptop open, papers arranged neatly beside it. Mark entered, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. "Emily, I can explain about the retirement account," he began, setting his briefcase down carefully. "Can you?" I kept my voice neutral, watching him closely. "It's not what you think. I've made an investment opportunity, a time-sensitive one with significant returns. I should have discussed it with you first, but I knew you'd be skeptical without seeing the projections." "An investment opportunity," I repeated, "with our entire retirement savings." "Not our entire savings," he countered, loosening his tie. "We have other accounts." "Had," I corrected, sliding printouts toward him. "You've systematically emptied those too over the past year. Smaller amounts, but it adds up to another $143,000. His expression flickered, surprised that I'd traced. All the transactions quickly masked by renewed confidence, all part of the same investment strategy, he insisted. "Emily, I know finance isn't your area of expertise, but you need to trust me on this. In 6 months, we'll see returns of at least 20%. "And does Heather Brooks factor into these projected returns?" The color drained from his face. "Who?" "Heather, your yoga instructor client, the one you're building a mountain sanctuary with at Mountain View Estates, Cabin 14, I believe." I tapped the brochure on the table between us. Mark sank into a chair, recalibrating his strategy. I could almost see the calculations behind his eyes, weighing which lies might still be salvageable. "It's not what it looks like," he tried again, weaker this time. "It looks like you stole our retirement savings to buy a luxury cabin for yourself and your girlfriend," I said evenly. "It looks like you've been planning this for months, systematically moving our money while pretending everything was normal. It looks like betrayal, Mark, plain and simple." "I was going to tell you," he said, switching tactics. "After the cabin purchase was secure. It's an investment property, Emily. Yes, Heather helped me find it, and yes, we've become close. But the property is an investment opportunity for both of us. For all of us," he amended quickly. "All of us," I repeated, letting the absurdity of his statement hang in the air between us. "Our marriage hasn't been working for a long time," Mark said, a note of accusation entering his voice. "You're always working, always prioritizing Summit over our relationship. When was the last time we really connected? Heather understands me, supports my ambitions, supports them with my retirement savings, apparently." Mark leaned forward, expression earnest. "The money will come back to us, Emily. The property is already undervalued. In a year, it will be worth at least 30% more. I can show you the market analyses, the projections." I closed my laptop slowly. "Here's what's going to happen, Mark. You're going to transfer every penny back into our joint accounts by noon tomorrow." He blinked, clearly not expecting this direct approach. "I can't. The funds are already committed to the Mountain View purchase. The contracts are being drawn up now." "Then uncommit them," I said simply. "Because at noon tomorrow, I'm meeting with James Rodriguez to discuss divorce proceedings and financial fraud charges." "Fraud?" Mark's voice rose. "It's a joint account, Emily. Legally, I have every right to move that money." "Interesting that you've researched the legal aspects so thoroughly," I noted. "But I wonder if your firm knows you've been using client meetings to pursue romantic relationships and personal real estate deals. I wonder if the state licensing board would be interested in how Denver's trusted financial advisors conduct themselves." The threat to his professional reputation landed precisely as intended. Mark's face paled further. "You wouldn't." "Return the money, Mark, all of it. Then we can discuss separation terms like reasonable adults." He stared at me, reassessing. I wasn't playing the role he'd expected, the betrayed emotional wife. He'd anticipated tears, recriminations, perhaps begging. Not this calm, strategic opponent who understood the value of leverage. I need time, he said finally. Unwinding these transactions isn't simple. Noon tomorrow, I repeated, standing. I'll be staying at the Westside Hotel tonight. I find I can't stomach being under the same roof as you right now. As I packed an overnight bag, Mark hovered in the doorway, still trying to manage the situation. Emily, please, let's talk about this rationally. There are aspects of our financial situation you don't understand. I zipped the bag closed and faced him. What I understand perfectly is that you made a choice, Mark. You chose to betray 12 years of marriage for a woman you barely know and a mountain view you couldn't afford, honestly. What you don't understand is that choices have consequences. I brushed past him, bag in hand. Where are you going? What are you planning? He called after me, a note of panic finally breaking through his controlled facade. I have meetings, I said simply. What meetings? With who? I paused at the front door. That's no longer your concern. As I drove away from our home, a strange calm settled over me. The initial shock and hurt had been replaced by something cooler, more focused. Mark had underestimated me in so many ways: my awareness, my resolve, and most critically, my resources. At the hotel, I opened my laptop and found an email from Karen with contact information for Sarah Martinez at Mountain View Estates, along with property details for the cabins surrounding Cabin 14. There were 4 adjacent properties still available: Cabins 11, 13, 15, and 17, all with excellent views and similar layouts to Mark's chosen property. I called Sarah immediately, my voice pleasant and professional. Ms. Martinez, my name is Emily Bennett, I said, using my maiden name. I understand you handle sales for Mountain View Estates. I'm interested in making a significant investment there. Of course, Ms. Bennett. I'd be happy to show you properties. Are you looking for a vacation home or an investment opportunity? Both, actually. I'm specifically interested in cabins 11, 13, 15, and 17. There was a pause. All 4 properties? Yes. I understand Alpine Summit Holdings is motivated to secure investments quickly. I'm prepared to make an all-cash offer for all 4 cabins, with an expedited closing. Sarah's tone shifted from polite interest to focused excitement. That would be substantial. Those are premium properties, each priced between $900,000 and $1 million. I'm aware of the pricing, I said calmly. I'm also aware of the development's financial challenges. I believe we can reach an arrangement beneficial to both parties. We scheduled a meeting for 9 a.m. the next morning, giving me time to meet with Sarah before my appointment with James Rodriguez. I hung up and opened my Western Trust account again, staring at the balance. It would cover approximately half of what I'd need for all 4 properties. The rest would require leveraging my Summit stock options and securing a line of credit. It was financially risky, emotionally driven, and potentially the most satisfying move I could make. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Please come home. We can work this out. I didn't respond. Another text followed. I've started the process to return the funds. It will take 2-3 business days. Too little, too late. Mark wasn't returning the money out of remorse or integrity, but because I'd cornered him with threats to his professional reputation. He still believed he could manage the situation, smooth things over, perhaps salvage both his affair and enough of our assets to move forward with his plans. He had no idea what was coming. Morning arrived after a restless night. I dressed carefully in my most authoritative business attire: charcoal pantsuit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, armor for the battles ahead. Sarah Martinez met me at the Mountain View Estate sales office, a rustic modern building showcasing the development's aesthetic. She was professionally enthusiastic as she spread property maps and floor plans across the conference table. These 4 cabins represent some of our finest offerings, she explained, highlighting each one. All feature panoramic views, premium finishes, and exclusive access to the development's amenities. And they all surround cabin 14, I noted, studying the property map. Sarah hesitated briefly. Yes, cabin 14 is centrally positioned among these properties. It's no longer available. I know, I said simply. It's being purchased by Mark Thompson and Heather Brooks. Sarah's professional smile faltered. I'm not at liberty to discuss other clients' transactions. Of course not. I'm simply explaining why these specific properties interest me. I met her gaze steadily. I'd like to make an offer on all 4 cabins, 10% below asking price, with closing in 14 days, or less, all cash. Sarah blinked rapidly, mental calculations visibly running behind her eyes. Such an offer would solve significant cash flow problems for the troubled development. I would need to present this to the developers immediately, she said. They may want to counter. They're welcome to counter, but my timeline is firm. I have other investment opportunities if this doesn't align with their needs. 2 hours later, as I sat across from James Rodriguez in his downtown office, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Developers accept your offer. Preparing. Contracts now. James looked up from the financial documents I'd provided, his expression grim. Based on what you've shown me, Mrs. Thompson, we have strong grounds for divorce citing financial misconduct. The systematic withdrawal of funds from joint accounts, particularly the retirement accounts, represents a clear pattern of dissipation of marital assets. And if Mark returns the money? I asked. That would mitigate the financial damage but wouldn't erase the misconduct. It would likely result in a more equitable division of assets. He paused. May I ask about these properties you're purchasing, using separate funds maintained throughout your marriage? I showed him the accepted offer for the 4 Mountain View Estates cabins. His eyebrows rose. These are the properties surrounding the cabin your husband attempted to purchase with marital funds? Exactly. James leaned back in his chair, expression carefully neutral. Legally, you're within your rights to use separate funds as you see fit. However, I should advise you that such a purchase, clearly designed to impact your husband's property value and enjoyment, could potentially be viewed by the court as strategic, I supplied. A hint of a smile touched his lips. That's one word for it. My phone buzzed again with a text from Mark. Funds will be returned by end of day tomorrow. Can we talk in person tonight? I showed the message to James, who nodded approvingly. That's a start. I recommend documenting the return of funds before proceeding with any discussion of separation terms. As I left James's office, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: satisfaction at the progress of my plans, sadness for the death of my marriage, and an unexpected sense of liberation. For 12 years, I'd been Emily Thompson, Mark's wife, half of a partnership that I now realized had been fundamentally unequal. He had seen me as a resource to be managed, an obstacle to be maneuvered around, rather than a partner to be respected. Now I was becoming someone new, someone who understood her own power and wasn't afraid to use it. I texted Mark back, I'll come by the house at 7 p.m. after the funds are confirmed returned. That evening, I parked in front of our house, still legally our joint property, but no longer home. Mark opened the door before I could knock, his expression a careful blend of contrition and rationality. Emily, thank you for coming. He stepped aside to let me enter. The transfers have been initiated. All the funds should be back in our accounts by noon tomorrow. Our accounts, I repeated. Interesting how quickly they became our accounts again once you realized you couldn't just take what you wanted. He sighed, following me into the living room. I made a terrible mistake. I got caught up in something that isn't what I really want. And what do you want, Mark? To save our marriage. He reached for my hand, which I smoothly moved away. What we have, 12 years together, our home, our future, It's worth fighting for. I studied him, this man I had loved and trusted, now revealed as a stranger. What we had, I corrected. And what exactly happened with Heather in cabin 14? Mark ran a hand through his hair, calculating his response. I've ended things with Heather, the cabin. There were complications with the financing. Complications named Emily Thompson. I see, I said simply. We can start fresh, he continued, gaining confidence from my calm response. Couples counseling, maybe a vacation together, reconnecting. I know I've broken your trust. But people make mistakes, Emily. Terrible ones. But they can be forgiven. It was so tempting to reveal everything then. The 4 cabins I'd purchased surrounding his love nest. The new future I was building without him. To see his face when he realized I had outmaneuvered him completely. But strategic thinking prevailed. The property purchase wasn't finalized yet. The divorce proceedings were just beginning. Revealing my hand too early would give Mark time to counter. I need time to think, I said instead. The funds need to be returned in full, and I need space to decide what happens next. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever you need. Just don't make any hasty decisions, okay? We can work through this. I stood to leave, pausing at the door. One question, Mark. If I hadn't discovered the transfers, what was your plan? Were you going to divorce me after securing the cabin? Move Heather in while I was at some conference? His hesitation told me everything. That's what I thought, I said quietly. 2 weeks later, I stood on the construction site at Mountain View Estates, watching as foundation work began on my 4 cabins. The purchase had closed with remarkable speed once the developers understood I was offering immediate liquidity for their cash-strapped project. My financial position was tight. I'd leveraged almost everything I had, but the satisfaction was immeasurable. Cabin 14, Mark and Heather's dream home, now stood at the center of my small empire. Without the funds from our retirement accounts, Mark had been unable to complete the purchase. The developer, eager to maintain my goodwill as their largest individual investor, had rescinded Mark's purchase agreement, citing financing contingencies. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. How's it going up there? I took a photo of the construction site, the magnificent mountain view visible behind the wooden stakes marking my 4 properties, and sent it to her with the caption, "Building my future, quite literally." Mark had discovered my purchases the previous week, when final divorce papers were delivered alongside property notifications from Mountain View Estates. His furious calls and texts had gone unanswered. There was nothing to discuss. The courts had frozen our marital assets pending divorce proceedings. His professional reputation was under review by his firm following anonymous tips about ethical violations, and his mountain sanctuary was now surrounded by properties he couldn't control. Actions, as my grandmother always said, have consequences. As I watched the construction crews work, I felt none of the bitter satisfaction I had expected. Instead, there was a sense of possibilities opening before me. These properties represented not just revenge against Mark's betrayal, but the foundation of something new, a real estate investment portfolio that could become a second career alongside my work at Summit. What had begun as an emotionally driven response to betrayal was evolving into a strategic reinvention. The woman Mark had underestimated, the workaholic wife too busy to notice his deception, had transformed into someone stronger, more decisive, and ultimately more successful than he could have imagined. My grandmother had been right about financial independence, but her lesson had deeper implications than I'd understood. The separate account I'd maintained throughout my marriage hadn't just protected me financially, it had preserved a part of myself that remained independent, capable, and resilient when everything else crumbled. The mountain view spread before me, breathtaking in its expanse, unmarred by betrayal or regret. This view, these properties, this future, they were mine. Not because I had taken them from someone else, as Mark had tried to do, but because I had built them myself, with resources I had wisely set aside for moments that tested everything I thought I knew. Sometimes the greatest betrayals lead to the most powerful reinventions. Sometimes what appears to be an ending becomes the first step toward a future you never imagined. Stronger, more authentic, and entirely your own. I sat in my rental car outside the Mountain View Estates sales office, staring at my phone as another message from Mark appeared. "This is insane, Emily. 4 properties? We need to talk face to face." I switched the phone to silent and tucked it into my purse. There would be time for confrontations later. Today was about finalizing my strategy. Sarah Martinez greeted me with newfound respect as I entered the office. News travels fast in small development circles, and overnight I'd transformed from prospective buyer to the largest individual investor in their troubled project. "Good morning, Ms. Bennett," she said, using my maiden name as I'd requested for all paperwork. "The developers are thrilled with your investment and wanted me to personally express their appreciation for the expedited closing." "I'm sure they are," I replied, setting my portfolio on the conference table. "Now I'd like to discuss construction timelines for all 4 properties." Sarah spread the architectural plans across the table. Typically, cabin construction takes 8 to 10 months from foundation to completion, but given your position as a priority investor, we can expedite certain phases. "I want foundations poured within 2 weeks, I stated, watching her expression carefully. Her smile faltered. 2 weeks? That's extremely aggressive, especially for 4 properties simultaneously. "I understand it's unconventional," I acknowledged, "but I'm prepared to pay premium rates for accelerated work. It's important that visible construction begin as quickly as possible." "May I ask why the urgency?" Sarah ventured carefully. I met her gaze directly. "Let's just say I'm eager to establish my presence in the development." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding without needing explicit details. In her years selling luxury properties, she'd undoubtedly witnessed enough wealthy divorces to read between the lines. "I'll speak with the construction manager today," she promised. "With appropriate incentives, we might be able to begin foundation work next week." "Excellent." I opened my portfolio and removed the architectural modifications I'd been working on. I also have some specific design changes for each property. For the next hour, we reviewed my proposed modifications. The changes weren't dramatic: shifted window placements, adjusted roof lines, strategic balcony positions, but each served a specific purpose in relation to Cabin 14. "These adjustments are interesting," Sarah commented, studying the placements. "Especially these large windows on Cabin 13 facing directly toward Cabin 14. "I value connection between properties," I said evenly. "Visibility fosters community, don't you think?" A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "Certainly." "And these modified exterior lighting plans for Cabins 11 and 17? I believe proper illumination is essential for security. The positioning will ensure comprehensive coverage. Comprehensive coverage that would coincidentally shine directly into Cabin 14's master bedroom and living areas. If Mark somehow managed to resurrect his financing and purchase the property, he would find privacy in short supply." By the end of our meeting, Sarah had agreed to present my construction acceleration request to the developers, along with my willingness to pay premium rates for expedited work. As we wrapped up, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and her expression tightened slightly. "Excuse me," she said, stepping away from the table. "I should take this." I nodded, gathering my papers. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see Sarah's body language shift from professional poise to discomfort. When she returned a few minutes later, her composure was slightly ruffled. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Yes, of course." She hesitated. "That was actually Mark Thompson, the potential buyer for Cabin 14 you mentioned earlier. He's quite insistent about speaking with the developer about reinstating his purchase agreement." I raised an eyebrow. And will the developer reinstate it? Sarah met my gaze. The developer greatly values the substantial investment you've made in 4 properties. One cabin purchase, especially one with financing complications, doesn't carry the same weight. I'm glad to hear business sense prevails, I said, rising to leave. There is one thing you should know, Sarah added. Mr. Thompson mentioned he would be visiting the property site this afternoon with his attorney to discuss options. You might want to adjust your schedule accordingly if you'd prefer to avoid an encounter. I considered this information. Part of me wanted to avoid Mark entirely until the foundations were poured and my plans undeniable. The strategic part of me, however, recognized the value in establishing dominance early. Thank you for the heads up, but I'll be proceeding with my site visit as planned. My architect is meeting me there at 2. Sarah nodded, a new respect in her eyes. Of course. I'll have the construction manager join you as well to discuss the expedited timeline. As I drove up to the Mountain View Estates development site later that afternoon, I spotted Mark's Mercedes already parked near Cabin 14's plot. A small group stood on the property. Mark, in what I recognized as his important client meeting, suit, gesturing emphatically to an older man who appeared to be the developer, while a third man in an expensive suit listened with arms crossed. Mark's attorney, presumably. I parked beside Sarah's vehicle and took a moment to compose myself. This confrontation was coming sooner than I'd anticipated, but perhaps that was for the best, like ripping off a bandage. Sarah approached my car as I exited. Ms. Bennett, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize they would still be here. It's fine, I assured her, straightening my blazer. Is my architect here yet? Yes, Victor is waiting by Cabin 11's site. The construction manager is with him. She glanced nervously toward Mark's group. Would you prefer to start there and hope they've concluded their business by the time we make our way around? Not at all, I replied. Let's start with Cabin 13. It shares the longest boundary with Cabin 14, doesn't it? Sarah's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. Yes, it does. We walked toward the architectural stakes marking Cabin 13's boundaries, which required passing within 20 feet of Mark's group. I could pinpoint the exact moment he noticed me. His animated gesturing stopped mid-sentence, his body stiffening like he'd been struck. Emily? His voice carried across the space between us, equal parts confusion and alarm. I turned toward him with practiced casualness. Hello, Mark. He broke away from his group and strode toward me, face flushed with either embarrassment or anger. What are you doing here? Meeting with my architect, I replied calmly. About my properties. The word "my" hung between us, its significance unmistakable. Mark's eyes darted from me to Sarah, then to the stakes marking Cabin 13's boundaries. Your properties, he repeated slowly. You bought property here? When? How? 4 properties. Actually, I corrected, Cabins 11, 13, 15, and 17, the ones surrounding Cabin 14. I gestured to the stakes around us. I closed last week, all cash. The blood drained from Mark's face as the implications registered. He glanced back at the developer who was watching our interaction with evident interest. That's why they rescinded my purchase agreement. He said, realization dawning. You did this deliberately. I made a sound investment, I countered. 4 premium properties in an exclusive development with excellent appreciation potential. Isn't that what you were planning to do with our retirement savings? Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. This is vindictive, Emily. You're trying to block my purchase to punish me. Actually, I've already blocked your purchase. The developer rescinded your agreement days ago. I'm simply proceeding with my investment strategy. Investment strategy, he scoffed. You've never shown any interest in real estate before. I've never had my retirement stolen before, I replied evenly. Life is full of new experiences. Mark's attorney approached, sensing tension. "Everything all right here, Mark?" "Emily, this is Gregory Winters," Mark introduced stiffly. "My attorney." "Greg, this is my wife, Emily." "Soon-to-be ex-wife," I corrected, extending my hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Winters. I believe you've been in contact with James Rodriguez, my counsel." Gregory shook my hand, his expression cautious. "Yes, we've exchanged some preliminary communications regarding your separation." "Divorce," I corrected again, "not separation." Mark's face hardened. "Emily, can we talk privately for a moment?" I checked my watch. "My architect is waiting. Perhaps another time." As I turned to leave, Mark caught my arm. "How did you do this? Where did you get the money for 4 luxury properties?" I gently but firmly removed his hand from my arm. "I had resources you didn't know about." "What resources?" "All our accounts were joint." "Not all of them." I smiled at the genuine confusion on his face. "I maintained a separate account throughout our marriage. My grandmother taught me the importance of financial independence." The shock on Mark's face would have been comical under different circumstances. For 12 years, he'd believed he had complete knowledge and control of our finances, only to discover I'd maintained a significant secret fund he knew nothing about. "How much?" he asked, voice barely audible. "Enough," I replied simply. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have construction plans to discuss." I walked away, joining Sarah and the 2 men waiting by Cabin 13's boundary. Victor Chen, my architect, greeted me with professional enthusiasm, unaware of the personal drama unfolding. "Ms. Bennett, I've reviewed your modification requests. Fascinating choices. The adjusted window placements will maximize both light and views." "And privacy invasion," Mark muttered, having followed us despite his attorney's visible attempts to restrain him. I ignored him, focusing on Victor. "I'm particularly interested in accelerating the construction timeline. I understand there may be premium costs involved." The construction manager, a weathered man introduced as Joe Harrigan, nodded. "With adequate incentives, we can bring in multiple crews and work extended hours. Foundation work could begin next week for all 4 properties simultaneously." "Excellent," I approved. "Please proceed with those arrangements." Mark stepped forward. "You can't be serious about this, Emily. 4 properties? You're leveraging yourself to what, spite me?" Joe and Victor exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing they'd stepped into marital crossfire. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion later," Sarah suggested diplomatically. "No need," I said firmly. "Mr. Thompson was just leaving to meet with the developer about his rescinded purchase agreement." A futile effort, but everyone needs hope. Mark's face flushed with anger. "This isn't over, Emily. It was over the moment you decided our retirement fund would make a nice down payment on your girlfriend's dream home," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the emotion threatening to break through. "Now it's just a question of consequences." Mark's attorney finally succeeded in pulling him away, murmuring something about strategic retreats and not escalating tensions. As they walked back toward the developer, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Well," Victor said after an awkward pause, "shall we discuss the balcony placement for Cabin 13? For the next hour, we walked the boundaries of all 4 properties, discussing construction timelines, material selections, and design modifications. I was acutely aware of Mark watching from a distance, his Mercedes still parked nearby long, after his meeting with the developer had apparently concluded. By the time we finished, the sun was setting over the mountains, casting long shadows across the property stakes. The view was genuinely spectacular, and for a moment, I allowed myself to appreciate the beauty of what I'd purchased, separate from its strategic value in my divorce. "Ms. Bennett," Joe said as we concluded our meeting, "with the premiums you've approved, we can have foundation crews here Monday morning. Framing could begin within 3 weeks." "Perfect," I approved. I want to see visible progress as quickly as possible. As the others departed, I lingered by Cabin 11's site, ostensibly admiring the view but actually gathering my composure before facing the long drive back to Denver. The emotional toll of confronting Mark had left me drained but determined. Why these 4 properties? Mark's voice came from behind me. He'd apparently waited until I was alone. I turned to face him. Why do you care? Your purchase agreement was rescinded. What happens with the surrounding properties shouldn't concern you. I can secure alternative financing, he insisted. Heather's parents are willing to help. The casual mention of his mistress's parents funding their love nest hit harder than I wanted to admit. How nice for you both. Mark stepped closer, his tone shifting to something almost pleading. Emily, I made a terrible mistake. I know that. But this? Buying 4 properties just to surround the one I wanted. It's excessive. It's not like you. You have no idea what I'm like, I replied quietly. You never did. You saw what you wanted to see. The career-focused wife who wouldn't notice your betrayal, who would accept whatever explanation you offered about our finances because it wasn't her area of expertise. He had the decency to look ashamed. I never meant for things to go this far. And yet they did, I noted. Actions have consequences, Mark. You're experiencing yours. By bankrupting yourself on revenge properties? He challenged. How does this help you? First, I'm not bankrupting myself. Second, these aren't revenge properties. They're strategic acquisitions that will appreciate significantly. And third, I met his gaze directly. Watching you lose what you tried to steal from me is just a bonus. Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. What do you want from me, Emily? I've returned the money. I've agreed to your divorce terms. I've lost the cabin. What more do you want? I want nothing from you, I replied truthfully. That's the point you're missing. For 12 years, I built a life with you, shared everything with you. Now I'm building something that's entirely mine, something you can't touch, can't influence, can't manipulate. The truth of my words settled between us. This wasn't really about the properties themselves, or even about the money. It was about reclaiming power in a relationship where I'd discovered too late that the balance had always been uneven. The developer won't sell Cabin 14 to me while you own the surrounding properties, Mark said finally. You've made your point. Would you consider selling these lots back to the development? I laughed softly. Not a chance. Then what's your end game here? Build 4 luxury cabins out of spite? You can't possibly need 4 vacation properties. Maybe I'll rent them out, I mused. Mountain View Estates surrounding properties. A unique vacation experience for divorcees seeking justice. Mark didn't find my joke amusing. This is crazy, Emily. You're making financial decisions based on emotion. That's rich coming from the man who emptied our retirement account. To impress his yoga instructor girlfriend, I observed. Mark flinched. Heather wasn't. It wasn't just about her. It was about building something for my future. A future that didn't include me, despite 12 years of marriage, I pointed out. You made your choice, Mark. Now I'm making mine. As the last light faded from the sky, I walked to my car, leaving Mark standing alone by the property stakes that marked the boundaries of my new beginning. The confrontation had been draining but necessary, a definitive statement that our power dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Back at my hotel room, I found an email from Joe with the accelerated construction timeline attached. Foundation work would indeed begin Monday, with crews working extended hours to make rapid progress on all 4 properties simultaneously. By the time my divorce was finalized, the basic structures would be clearly visible. 4 cabins surrounding the plot where Mark had planned his secret getaway. I should have felt triumph, or at least satisfaction. Instead, a strange melancholy settled over me as I prepared for bed. Not regret. I remained convinced my actions were justified. but a sadness for the years wasted with someone who had ultimately viewed me as an obstacle rather than a partner. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. "How did it go today? Surviving?" I typed back, "Confrontation with Mark at the property. Foundations start Monday." Her response came quickly. "He showed up there? How did he take the news about your purchases?" "About as well as you'd expect. Called it crazy and vindictive." "And what did you call it?" I smiled slightly. "Strategic. Acquisitions with excellent appreciation potential." Karen's reply made me laugh out loud. "Remind me never to cross you. Dinner tomorrow when you're back? You can tell me everything." "Definitely," I confirmed. "Could use a friendly face after today." As I set my phone aside, my email pinged with a message from James Rodriguez. The subject line read, "Urgent, response to emergency motion." I opened it immediately, scanning the contents with growing alarm. Mark's attorney had filed an emergency motion claiming my property purchases represented intentional dissipation of separate assets in bad faith, and requesting that the court order me to either sell the properties or include them in the marital estate for division. James had attached his drafted response, calmly highlighting that my separate funds had been maintained throughout the marriage without Mark's knowledge but not deceptively hidden, that the purchases were made before divorce proceedings began, and that investment in appreciating assets could hardly be classified as dissipation. At the end of his email, James added a personal note. "This is a predictable countermove and unlikely to succeed, but be prepared for a hearing next week. Their strategy is clear. If they can't stop your construction directly, they'll try to claim ownership interest in the properties through the divorce. When can you meet to discuss our response in detail?" I replied immediately, suggesting a meeting the following afternoon after my return to Denver. Despite James's reassurance, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. I hadn't anticipated Mark moving this quickly with legal countermeasures. Sleep eluded me as I considered the implications. If the court somehow ruled that my separately maintained funds should be considered marital property despite being unknown to Mark, or that my purchases constituted bad faith actions, my carefully constructed plan could unravel. Mark might end up with partial ownership of the very properties I'd bought to surround his love nest. By morning, I'd moved beyond anxiety to renewed determination. I called Sarah Martinez before checking out of my hotel. "Sarah, I need the foundation. Work to begin immediately. Today if possible, not Monday." "Today?" she echoed, surprise evident in her voice. "It's Saturday, Ms. Bennett. The crews aren't scheduled until—" "I understand it's unconventional," I cut in. "I'm prepared to pay triple the premium rate for weekend emergency work. I need visible, documented construction activity on all 4 properties by end of day." There was a pause while Sarah processed this request. "This is about establishing work commenced prior to some legal proceeding, isn't it?" Her perceptiveness didn't surprise me. "Let's just say timing has become critically important." "I'll see what I can do," she promised. "The construction manager might be able to bring in a skeleton crew for preliminary site work and excavation. It won't be full foundation pouring, but it would constitute commenced construction activity." "Perfect. Please proceed and keep me updated with photographs of the work." 3 hours later, as I drove back toward Denver, my phone pinged with messages from Sarah, photographs showing excavation equipment breaking ground on all 4 of my properties. The sight sent a wave of relief through me. Commenced construction would make any court intervention more complicated and less likely. I forwarded the images to James with a brief message. "Construction has officially begun on all 4 properties. How does this impact their emergency motion?" His response was immediate and gratifying. "Excellent timing. Physical construction commencement strengthens our position significantly. Courts are generally reluctant to interfere with active construction, especially when substantial funds have already been committed." As I merged onto the highway toward Denver, My phone rang with Karen's ringtone. "Emily, where are you right now?" she asked without preamble. "About an hour outside Denver. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly, but you should know Mark. Just stormed into Summit's offices looking for you. He seemed agitated." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What happened?" "Security escorted him out when he started making a scene. He was shouting something about sabotage and property theft." "Emily, I've never seen him like that. It was like he'd completely lost his professional veneer. Mark coming to my workplace, creating a public disturbance. It was so out of character for a man who prided himself on calculated control that it signaled just how deeply I'd disrupted his plans." "Did he say anything specific about the properties?" I asked. "Just that you were deliberately sabotaging him and that he wouldn't stand for it." "Emily, be careful. He's not thinking rationally." "I'll be fine," I assured her, though a flicker of concern registered. "I'm meeting James this afternoon to discuss next steps. We'll handle whatever Mark tries to throw at us legally." "It's not the legal maneuvers I'm worried about," Karen said softly. "It's the desperate man who just got publicly escorted from your workplace by security." After hanging up, I called James again, updating him on Mark's workplace appearance. "This actually helps us," James noted after a moment's consideration. "Erratic behavior, public disturbances, it all undermines his position as the reasonable party in these proceedings. I'll add this incident to our response to his emergency motion." By the time I reached Denver, I'd received additional photos from Sarah showing remarkable progress on the excavation work. The crews had marked foundation outlines for all 4 cabins, with actual concrete pouring scheduled for early Sunday morning. The accelerated construction was costing me a small fortune in premium labor rates, but every shovelful of dirt removed made Mark's legal challenges more difficult. I checked into a downtown hotel rather than returning to our house. Staying in a secure building with staff seemed prudent given Mark's increasingly volatile behavior. After refreshing quickly, I met James at his office, where we spent 2 hours refining our response to Mark's emergency motion. "The hearing is scheduled for Tuesday morning," James explained as we wrapped up. "Judge Cardwell is known for his no-nonsense approach, which generally works in our favor given the facts of this case." "Will I need to testify about my separate account?" I asked. "Possibly, but we've documented its existence throughout your marriage. Bank statements show regular deposits of portions of your bonuses for years. There's nothing improper about maintaining separate funds, especially when you never actively concealed them." As I left James's office, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously to find a photo of Cabin 14's site at Mountain View Estates, with a handwritten sign planted in the center reading, "Future home of Mark and Heather Thompson, coming soon." A text followed immediately. "Two can play strategic games, Emily. I've found new financing. Cabin 14 will be mine by Wednesday." A moment later, a second message arrived from the same number. "This is Heather, by the way. Mark thought you should hear it from me directly. He's moving on. Maybe you should too." I stared at the messages, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. The audacity of Mark giving my number to his mistress, of Heather contacting me directly. It was both infuriating and oddly clarifying. They deserved each other, the deceptive husband and the woman arrogant enough to text his wife about their love nest. Rather than responding, I forwarded the messages to James with a brief note. "Mark appears to have regained financing for Cabin 14 and has given my contact information to his mistress." James's response was immediate. "Save these messages. Harassment from the affair partner can be relevant to divorce proceedings." I blocked the number and continued to my dinner with Karen, determined not to let Mark and Heather's juvenile tactics derail my evening. When I arrived at the restaurant, Karen was already waiting, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You look better than I expected," she observed as I sat down. Construction has officially begun on all 4 properties, I replied, showing her the photos Sarah had sent. Mark's emergency motion is unlikely to succeed, and apparently, his new strategy is having Heather text me directly about their revived plans for cabin 14. Karen's eyes widened. She texted you? That's impressively tactless. They've found new financing, I said, making air quotes. Probably her parents, from what Mark mentioned yesterday. They're determined to proceed with the purchase. And how do you feel about that possibility? Karen asked carefully. I considered the question as our drinks arrived. Honestly, let them have it. My properties surround cabin 14 on all sides. Once construction is complete, they'll have the worst privacy situation in the entire development. Every window will look directly into another of my cabins. Their outdoor spaces will be overlooked by my balconies. Their mountain sanctuary will be anything but. Karen smiled slowly. You really have thought of everything. I've had excellent motivation, I replied, raising my glass in a small toast. To strategic acquisitions with excellent appreciation potential. As we clinked glasses, I felt something settle within me. A certainty that regardless of Mark and Heather's countermoves, I had already won the most important battle. I had reclaimed my agency, protected my financial future, and discovered strengths I hadn't realized I possessed. Monday morning brought another series of photographs from Sarah, concrete foundations being poured for all 4 cabins simultaneously, with framing materials already delivered and waiting nearby. Construction had progressed from commenced to substantially underway in record time, further securing my position before Tuesday's hearing. I forwarded the latest construction photos to James, who responded with a thumbs-up emoji followed by a more formal message. Perfect timing. I've incorporated these into our response brief. The physical evidence of substantial construction investment significantly undermines their claim of bad faith asset dissipation. As I prepared for a day at Summit, trying to focus on work despite the impending legal battle, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Expecting another contact attempt from Heather, I nearly declined the call, but professional habit made me answer. Emily Thompson speaking. Ms. Thompson, this is Thomas. Callaway, the lead developer for Mountain View Estates. The man's voice was smooth and authoritative. I understand there's been some competitive interest in our properties recently. I straightened, instantly alert. Yes, that's one way to put it. I've received a very aggressive offer for cabin 14 from Mark Thompson, who I understand is your husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband, I corrected automatically. Yes, well. He cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson has offered significantly above asking price, with proof of financing, from outside investors. Under normal circumstances, this would be an easy decision for us. But I chose these specific properties because they represented the best investment opportunity in the development, I replied, meeting Judge Cardwell's penetrating gaze. The 4 cabins surrounding cabin 14 occupy premium positions with exceptional views. The developer was motivated to sell quickly due to cash flow issues, allowing me to negotiate favorable terms. From a purely financial perspective, these properties have excellent appreciation potential. Judge Cardwell studied me for a moment. And the fact that these properties surround the cabin your husband attempted to purchase with your joint retirement. Funds had no bearing on your decision? I considered my answer carefully. I won't pretend I was unaware of the location, Your Honor, but my primary motivation was securing my financial future with sound investments after discovering my husband had emptied our retirement accounts without my knowledge. The judge nodded slightly, then turned to Mark. Mr. Thompson, when you transferred funds from joint accounts to purchase cabin 14, were you aware that Mrs. Thompson maintained separate financial accounts? Mark stood, straightening his tie. No, Your Honor. Throughout our 12-year marriage, I believed we maintained full financial transparency. I handled our joint finances with Emily's knowledge and consent. Her secret account came as a complete surprise. Yet you withdrew $277,000 from joint retirement accounts without discussing this with your wife, Judge Cardwell noted. That hardly suggests transparency on your part. Mark shifted uncomfortably. I made an error in judgment, Your Honor. I intended to surprise Emily with an investment opportunity that would benefit us both. The suppressed snort from James beside me suggested exactly what he thought of this explanation. Judge Cardwell's expression remained impassive, but his next question cut straight to the heart of the matter. And was Ms. Brooks to be included in this surprise for your wife? Mark paled visibly. My relationship with Heather Brooks developed separately from my investment decisions. Yet the property was intended as a residence for you and Ms. Brooks, correct? Not for you and Mrs. Thompson? Gregory Winters attempted to intervene. Your Honor, my client's personal relationships are not relevant to the question of asset dissipation before the court. Judge Cardwell fixed Gregory with a stern look. Mr. Winters, when your client withdraws substantial marital assets to purchase a property intended for residence with someone other than his spouse, his personal relationships become entirely relevant. The courtroom fell silent as Gregory consulted. Briefly with Mark, their whispered exchange tense. Meanwhile, James passed me a note. Going well. Judge recognizes the fundamental hypocrisy. Finally, Gregory addressed the court again. Your Honor, regardless of Mr. Thompson's personal circumstances, the fact remains that Mrs. Thompson has deliberately leveraged nearly all her separate assets to purchase properties specifically chosen to diminish the value and enjoyment of my client's investment. We request that these properties either be included in the marital estate for equitable distribution or that Mrs. Thompson be ordered to sell them. Judge Cardwell turned. Back to James. Mr. Rodriguez, your response? James rose smoothly. Your Honor, Mrs. Thompson used separate funds maintained throughout the marriage to make legitimate investments before divorce proceedings began. These investments have already resulted in substantial construction activity, with foundations poured on all 4 properties. He presented the photos of the construction progress. Ordering her to include these properties in the marital estate would effectively reward Mr. Thompson for his financial misconduct by giving him interest in assets purchased with funds he never knew existed. The judge reviewed the construction photos with interest. Impressively quick progress, Mrs. Thompson. I placed a premium on expedited construction, I explained. In today's market, building delays can significantly impact investment returns. Judge Cardwell nodded, then consulted some notes before looking up again. Mr. Thompson, have you secured financing to complete your purchase of Cabin 14? Mark straightened. Yes, Your Honor. The financing is in place, and the developer has accepted my offer, pending finalization. Yet, I understand the development's Architectural Review Committee will have significant input on your construction plans, the judge commented. Mark glanced at me suspiciously. I believe that's standard procedure for luxury developments, Your Honor. And are you aware that Mrs. Thompson has been appointed to that committee? The color drained from Mark's face as he turned to stare at me. This was clearly news to him. Gregory Winters looked equally surprised, hurriedly whispering to Mark. Judge Cardwell allowed the moment to linger before continuing. I find this situation instructive. Mr. Thompson secretly withdrew marital funds to purchase a property intended for use with someone other than his wife. Mrs. Thompson, upon discovering this betrayal, used her separate funds to make investments that, while potentially impacting Mr. Thompson's property, represent legitimate financial decisions. He closed the file decisively. The emergency motion is denied. Mrs. Thompson may proceed with her property investments as planned. They will remain her separate property and not subject to division in the divorce proceedings. Gregory immediately rose to object. Your Honor, this effectively allows Mrs. Thompson to use her position on the Architectural Review Committee to sabotage my client's property development. Judge Cardwell fixed Gregory with a stern look. Mr. Winters, your client attempted to use marital funds to establish a residence with his mistress, I suggest you advise him to reflect on the consequences of his actions rather than claiming victimhood. Mrs. Thompson's committee position is a business matter between her and the developer, not a court issue. With that, he adjourned the hearing. James gathered our papers with barely suppressed satisfaction as Mark and Gregory huddled in urgent consultation across the courtroom. "That went even better than expected," James murmured as we exited. Cardwell saw right through Mark's surprise investment nonsense. In the courthouse hallway, Mark caught up to us, his expression tight with controlled anger. "Emily, we need to talk." I glanced at James, who nodded slightly. 5 minutes in the consultation room, he said, indicating a small meeting space nearby. Once inside, Mark dropped all pretense of composure. "The Architectural Review Committee? Really? You're going to use that to block every aspect of my construction? I'm going to ensure all development at Mountain View Estates meets the established standards for quality and community harmony," I replied evenly. "The committee reviews plans for all properties, not just yours." "This is about revenge," he accused, pacing the small room. "You couldn't block my purchase outright, so you're going to make the process as difficult as possible." "Actions have consequences, Mark," I said simply. "When you chose to steal our retirement savings for a home with your girlfriend, did you consider the consequences?" He stopped pacing, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. "What do you want? There must be something I can offer to make this reasonable." "Reasonable," I repeated, almost amused by his assumption that this was a negotiation. "You still don't understand. I don't want anything from you. I don't need anything from you. For the first time in 12 years, I'm making decisions based entirely on my own interests, not ours. You can't possibly need 4 luxury cabins," he argued. "This is excessive, Emily, even as punishment." "It's not punishment, it's protection," I corrected. "I'm ensuring my financial future after you tried to steal it. The committee position is just good business sense, maintaining oversight of development that affects my investments." Mark C. studied me with new awareness, as if seeing a different person than the wife he thought he knew. "I never realized you could be this calculating." "You never realized a lot of things about me," I agreed, "including that I maintained a separate account throughout our marriage. Perhaps if you'd been more observant and less focused on your exit strategy, we wouldn't be here." His expression hardened. "Heather and I are still proceeding with cabin. That whatever obstacles you put in our way, we'll overcome them." "You're welcome to try," I replied calmly. "The committee meets next Wednesday to review your initial plans. I suggest you ensure they're in full compliance with all guidelines. I'll be reviewing them very thoroughly." As Mark left, frustration evident in every line of his body, James rejoined me. "I heard most of that," he admitted. "You handled it perfectly." Outside the courthouse, I took a moment to breathe the crisp Denver air, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The legal battle had been decided definitively in my favor. My properties would remain mine, my position on the Architectural Review Committee was secure, and Mark was finally beginning to understand that his actions had fundamentally changed our power dynamic. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Martinez. "Construction update. Framing begins tomorrow on all 4 properties. The crews report excellent progress on the foundations." I forwarded the message to James, who responded with a thumbs-up emoji. The rapid construction timeline would further solidify my position, making any future legal challenges from Mark increasingly difficult. Another message arrived, this one from Karen. "Heard you won. Celebration dinner tonight?" I smiled and texted back, "Absolutely. Somewhere nice, I'm feeling victorious." Later that evening, over plates of perfectly seared scallops at Denver's most exclusive restaurant, I recounted the hearing details to Karen. She listened intently, occasionally shaking her head in amazement at the judge's direct confrontation of Mark's hypocrisy. "So he's still buying cabin 14?" she asked, refilling our wine glasses. "Apparently," I confirmed. "With Heather's parents' money, from what I understand. But now I'm on the Architectural Review Committee, which means every detail of their construction plans requires my approval." Karen's eyes widened. "That's brilliantly devious. What are you planning to do with that power?" I sipped my wine thoughtfully. "Nothing unreasonable. Just ensure strict adherence to all guidelines. Window placements will need to respect neighboring properties' privacy. Exterior lighting must be properly shielded to prevent light pollution. Roof lines should harmonize with the natural landscape. All of which will coincidentally make their dream cabin less dreamlike," Karen noted with a sly smile. "Every development has constraints," I replied innocently. "Mark and Heather will simply need to work within them, just like everyone else." Karen studied me with newfound appreciation. "You know, I've always respected you professionally, but watching you handle this betrayal has been truly impressive. You've turned a devastating situation into an opportunity for growth and empowerment." Her words made me pause. In the whirlwind of legal maneuvers and property strategies, I hadn't fully processed the personal transformation occurring beneath the surface. The Emily who had discovered the empty retirement account 4 weeks ago was not the same woman sitting, here now, confidently planning her next steps with clear-eyed determination. "I'm discovering strengths I didn't know I had," I admitted. "It's like, all these years I was playing by certain rules, believing in partnership and shared goals. When Mark shattered those rules, it freed me to rewrite them entirely." To Emily too. "Thero," Karen declared, raising her glass. "More powerful than the original version." We clinked glasses, the fine crystal producing a clear, perfect note that seemed to symbolize my new clarity of purpose. The following week passed in a blur of professional and personal activity. At Summit, I channeled my renewed confidence into landing 2 major new clients, impressing even our normally stoic CEO. Meanwhile, construction at Mountain View Estates progressed at an extraordinary pace, with daily updates from Sarah showing the 4 cabins taking recognizable form. By Tuesday, the basic framing was complete on all properties, with roof structures beginning on cabins 11 and 13. Wednesday morning brought the first meeting of the Architectural Review Committee. I arrived at the Mountain View Estates main office, 15 minutes early, dressed in my most authoritative business attire and carrying a portfolio containing detailed notes on all pending applications. Most importantly, Mark and Heather's initial plans for cabin 14. Thomas Calloway greeted me warmly, introducing me to the other committee members: a retired architect named Harold Bentley, a current property owner named Diana Wexler, and the development's chief designer, Vincent Morgan. All regarded me with polite curiosity, clearly aware of my unique situation, but professional enough not to mention it directly. "We typically review 3 to 4 applications per session," Thomas explained as we settled around the conference table. "Today we have 5, including," he paused delicately, "Cabin 14's preliminary designs." Vincent distributed copies of all applications, and we began with the less controversial projects: a deck expansion for an existing cabin, a landscaping modification request, and a small greenhouse addition. The committee functioned efficiently, with Harold providing technical expertise, Diana offering a resident's perspective, and Vincent ensuring adherence to the development's aesthetic guidelines. When we finally reached Cabin 14's application, Thomas glanced at me. "Mrs. Thompson, given your unique relationship to this property, would you prefer to recuse yourself from this review?" "That won't be necessary," I replied calmly. "I can evaluate the application objectively based on the established guidelines." Harold and Diana exchanged subtle glances, but didn't object. Vincent spread out the preliminary designs for Cabin 14, an admittedly stunning mountain contemporary design with expansive windows, multiple outdoor living spaces, and a dramatic roofline that maximized the western views. The applicants are scheduled to arrive in 15 minutes to discuss their submission, Thomas noted. In the meantime, initial observations? I allowed Harold to speak first, noting his concerns about the roof pitch and water drainage. Diana commented on the extensive outdoor lighting plan, questioning its compliance with the development's dark sky provisions. When my turn came, I was meticulously professional. The window placement on the north and south elevations appears to create direct sightlines into neighboring properties, I observed, referencing the guidelines. Specifically, these master bedroom windows would look directly into the outdoor living spaces planned for cabins 13 and 15. Additionally, the proposed exterior lighting exceeds our lumens per square foot limitations by approximately 30%. Vincent nodded, making notes. Valid concerns. The privacy guidelines do specify that primary living spaces and bedrooms should maintain reasonable privacy from neighboring properties. The balcony on the western elevation also extends beyond the setback. Limitations, I continued, encroaching on the prescribed buffer zone by nearly 4 feet. By the time Mark and Heather arrived, accompanied by their architect, the committee had identified 17 specific issues requiring modification before preliminary approval could be granted. I maintained my professional demeanor as Thomas introduced me along with the other committee members, noting only a momentary tightening around Mark's eyes to indicate his discomfort. Heather, whom I was seeing in person for the first time, was younger than I'd imagined. Perhaps early 30s, with the polished look of someone who devoted considerable time to her appearance. She clearly hadn't expected to encounter her, Lover's wife on the committee, her composure briefly faltering before she recovered with a practiced smile. Their architect, an enthusiastic man named David Carrington, led the presentation, highlighting the cabin's sustainable features and integration with the natural landscape. As he spoke, I maintained a neutral expression, occasionally noting points in my portfolio. When the presentation concluded, Thomas turned to the committee. We've identified several areas where the current design requires modification to meet our guidelines. Harold, would you begin? One by one, each committee member outlined their concerns. When my turn came, I was precise and referenced every applicable guideline as I detailed the privacy issues, lighting violations, and setback encroachments. Additionally, I concluded, the proposed house positioning would require removal of 3 mature pine trees that serve as natural privacy screens between properties. The environmental guidelines specifically encourage preservation of existing mature trees whenever possible. David looked increasingly dismayed as the list of required modifications grew. Mark maintained his professional facade, but I could see tension in the set of his jaw and the way his fingers gripped his pen too tightly. Heather's initial confidence had faded into visible anxiety. These seem like very specific concerns, Mark finally commented, an edge in his voice. I wonder if other applications receive such thorough scrutiny. Thomas intervened smoothly. I assure you, Mr. Thompson, all applications undergo the same rigorous review process. Mountain View Estates maintains its premium status precisely because we adhere to these standards uniformly. Of course, Mark conceded, though his gaze fixed on me briefly. We'll work with David to address all concerns promptly. After they departed with their extensively annotated plans, Diana turned to me. That was impressively thorough, Emily. You certainly know the guidelines. I believe in proper preparation, I replied simply. These standards protect all our investments. Thomas concluded the meeting, but asked me to stay behind briefly. When the others had left, he regarded me thoughtfully. You handled that remarkably professionally, he observed. Many would have been tempted to be more overtly obstructive. I don't need to be obstructive when the guidelines themselves provide all the necessary constraints, I replied. Every concern I raised was legitimate and fully supported by the development standards. Thomas smiled slightly. Indeed, which makes them impossible to challenge as personal or vindictive. Very strategically played. I'm simply protecting my investments, I said, echoing my earlier statement. The fact that it happens to complicate my soon-to-be ex-husband's plans is an unfortunate coincidence. Unfortunate, Thomas repeated, amusement evident in his tone. Well, I look forward to our continued collaboration on the committee. Your attention to detail is refreshing. As I drove back to Denver that afternoon, I received a predictable text from Mark. Really, Emily? 17 required modifications? This is transparent sabotage. I didn't respond immediately, waiting until I reached my hotel to compose a measured reply. Every concern was based on specific guidelines that all property owners must follow. Your plans simply don't comply with established standards. His response came quickly. You know exactly what you're doing. This isn't about guidelines, it's about making this process as difficult as possible. Actions have consequences, Mark, I texted back. Perhaps you should have considered the committee review process before proceeding with Cabin 14. No further messages came, but I hadn't expected any. Mark was finally beginning to understand that his customary tactics, charm, manipulation, deflection, wouldn't work in this situation. The rules had changed, and I was no longer playing the accommodating wife. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Sarah Martinez called as I was preparing for work. Ms. Bennett, I thought you should know that Mr. Thompson's architect has submitted completely revised plans for Cabin 14, she said, surprise evident in her voice. They've essentially started from scratch, with a significantly modified design that addresses all 17 concerns raised by the committee. Already? I couldn't hide my surprise. The revisions should have taken weeks, not overnight. Apparently, they worked through the night, Sarah explained. Mr. Thompson has also requested an emergency committee review, citing construction timeline concerns. I considered this development. The rapid response suggested Mark was taking the committee's power seriously enough to completely redesign rather than attempt to fight the restrictions. The committee's next scheduled meeting is 2 weeks away, I noted. Yes, but Mr. Calloway is considering the emergency request given the construction season constraints. He wanted me to ask if you would be available for a special session tomorrow afternoon. I checked my calendar. I can make myself available. Please let Mr. Calloway know. After hanging up, I pondered this new strategy from Mark. Rather than fighting my position on the committee, he was attempting to work within the system but accelerate the process. It was a more sophisticated approach than I'd anticipated, showing an adaptability I hadn't given him credit for. When I arrived at Mountain View Estates the following afternoon for the emergency review session, I found only Thomas and Vincent present. Harold and Diana couldn't rearrange their schedules on such short notice, Thomas explained. But we have quorum with 3 members. The revised plans for Cabin 14 were laid out on the conference table, and I immediately noticed the dramatic changes. The cabin had been repositioned to preserve all mature trees, the window placements completely reconfigured to avoid direct sightlines to neighboring properties, the balcony reduced and relocated to comply with setbacks, and the lighting plan overhauled to meet dark sky requirements. They've addressed every concern, Vincent commented, clearly impressed by the comprehensive revisions. It's essentially a complete redesign. I examined the plans carefully, looking for any remaining issues, but found the design meticulously compliant with all guidelines. The revised cabin would have significantly reduced views compared to the original design, with privacy concessions that substantially diminished its premium features. It was, in real estate terms, a major downgrade from the dramatic showcase home originally planned. Mark and Heather arrived with David, who proudly presented the revisions. "We've completely reoriented the structure to address all committee concerns," he explained. "While this reduces the optimal view capture, it resolves the privacy issues with neighboring properties." I watched Heather's face as David outlined the compromises. Her expression revealed what the diplomatic architect wouldn't say. Their dream mountain sanctuary had been transformed into something much more modest, with limited views and reduced outdoor living space. This was not the luxury showcase she had envisioned. As the committee discussed the revisions, Mark maintained a neutral expression, but I could read the tension in his posture. He had clearly pushed for this rapid redesign, perhaps convincing Heather that compliance was the only viable path forward. "All my concerns appear to have been addressed," I acknowledged when Thomas asked for my assessment. "The revised plans comply with the guidelines regarding privacy, setbacks, and environmental considerations." "Vincent?" Thomas prompted. "I agree. The redesign meets all our standards. While significantly different from the original concept, it's actually a more harmonious integration with the surrounding properties." Thomas nodded. "Then I believe we can grant preliminary approval, pending final material selections and color palette submission." Heather's disappointment was poorly concealed, though she attempted a gracious smile. Mark simply nodded, his expression giving nothing away. As they gathered their approved plans, he glanced at me briefly, a look that acknowledged this round of the ongoing chess match between us. After they departed, Thomas turned to me with raised eyebrows. "I confess I'm surprised you didn't find additional concerns." "The redesign genuinely addresses all the guideline issues," I replied. "I won't manufacture problems when they've made good faith efforts to comply." Thomas studied me thoughtfully. "You know, of course, that their revised design significantly diminishes the property's value and appeal. The premium pricing of Cabin 14 was largely based on its unobstructed western views and outdoor living features." "I'm aware," I said simply. "So you've achieved your objective without appearing overtly obstructive," he observed. "The property will be worth considerably less than what they're paying, with compromised features, all while you maintained perfect professional objectivity. Rather masterfully played." I gathered my notes without directly acknowledging his assessment. "I believe in following established guidelines. They protect everyone's investments." As I drove away from the development, I received a text from Vincent. "In 15 years on the committee, I've never seen a more effective use of our guidelines to reshape a project. Respect." The message brought an unexpected smile to my face. Vincent had recognized what I'd accomplished, using the system legitimately to create consequences without ever overstepping professional boundaries. It was a form of power I'd never wielded before, subtle but remarkably effective. My phone rang, and I answered through the car's Bluetooth system to hear James's voice. "Just received notification that Mark's attorney has requested a settlement. Conference. Apparently, they're suddenly eager to finalize the divorce as quickly as possible." Interesting timing, I noted. Right after their cabin plans were approved with significant compromises. "I suspect Mr. Thompson is recognizing the value of a clean break," James replied. "Their proposed terms are surprisingly favorable. Full disclaimer of any interest in your Mountain View properties, equitable division of remaining marital assets, and an additional $125,000 compensatory payment for the financial misconduct." I absorbed this information as I navigated the mountain roads back toward Denver. They must be very motivated to resolve this quickly. "I believe they are," James agreed. "Would you like to proceed with the settlement conference?" I considered the question carefully. The past weeks had been devoted to establishing consequences for Mark's betrayal. Consequences he now clearly understood and was feeling. The modified cabin design, the compensatory payment, the rapid push for settlement, all indicated that my strategy had been effective. The question now was whether to accept this resolution or continue pressing my advantage. Schedule the conference. I decided, but make it clear that I expect full financial transparency before signing anything." "Of course," James confirmed. "I'll arrange it for early next week." As I ended the call, I realized I felt no particular satisfaction at Mark's capitulation, no vindictive pleasure in his compromised dreams. Instead, I felt something more valuable, a quiet confidence in my own capabilities, a certainty that I could protect myself and create a future entirely on my own terms. The woman who had discovered her emptied retirement account a month ago might have viewed this settlement as victory. The woman I was becoming recognized it simply as a necessary conclusion before moving forward to more important matters. As spring melted into summer, horizon retreats took shape on the mountainside with remarkable speed. The modified construction plans had initially concerned Joe with their ambitious timeline, but Victor's clever adaptations of the existing framing minimized delays. I visited the site weekly, each trip revealing dramatic progress as my vision materialized in wood, stone, and glass. "The main lodge is nearly enclosed," Sarah reported as we toured the property on a brilliant July morning. Victor's redesign, maintaining the original foundation while reorienting the structure, was genuinely inspired. I nodded in agreement, taking in the transformed landscape. Where 4 separate cabins had once been planned, a harmonious compound now emerged. The main lodge on Lot 18 featured a soaring great room with carefully positioned windows capturing mountain views while maintaining privacy. Connected by covered walkways, the smaller structures served specialized purposes: a wellness center on Lot 15, a creative studio on Lot 17, and meditation spaces on Lots 11 and 13. The buildings embraced a central courtyard with a fire pit and reflecting pool, creating an intimate gathering space sheltered from mountain winds. "The interior work should be completed by October," Sarah continued. "You could host your first retreat before the snow season if you wished." The timeline aligned perfectly with my evolving plans. Summit Marketing had been supportive of my part-time transition as I developed Horizon Retreats, allowing me to gradually shift from full-time executive to consultant while building my new venture. Karen had even offered to help design the retreat programs, bringing her organizational expertise to complement my vision. October would be perfect, I confirmed. The fall colors would provide a stunning backdrop for our inaugural retreat. As we continued our tour, I noticed construction activity at Cabin 14 had finally resumed after months of delay. A small crew worked on the foundation repairs needed after winter damage, a consequence of the hasty, compromised redesign. "Mr. Thompson's project has faced numerous challenges," Sarah commented, following my gaze. "The redesigned plan saved money on square footage but created drainage issues they're still addressing, and I understand Ms. Brooks has reconsidered her involvement." This was news to me. "Heather's no longer part of the project?" Sarah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable sharing personal information, but assuming I'd want to know. "From what I understand, she found the compromised design and ongoing construction problems disappointing, especially given her parents' significant financial investment. They've listed the property with us, hoping to sell once the structural issues are resolved." I absorbed this information with surprising neutrality. Mark and Heather's relationship had imploded under the pressure of reality. The Dream Mountain Sanctuary transformed into a construction nightmare of compromises and complications. In months past, I might have felt vindication. Now I felt only mild curiosity, their drama seeming distant and irrelevant to my current path. "I hope they find a buyer who appreciates the property's potential," I said simply, turning back toward my own thriving project. Sarah seemed relieved by my response. "On a related note, Mr. Calloway mentioned you've declined to continue on the Architectural Review Committee for the next term." "My own project requires my full attention," I explained, "and there's no longer any need for my particular oversight." The truth was more complex. My initial motivation for joining the committee maintaining control over Mark's development, had evolved as my own vision clarified. The committee position had served its purpose, establishing consequences and boundaries. Now it felt like an unnecessary connection to the past, one I was ready to relinquish. As summer progressed, I divided my time between summit marketing and Horizon retreats, gradually shifting my focus toward the latter. The divorce had finalized in June with minimal fanfare, legal confirmation of a relationship that had ended months earlier in all meaningful ways. Mark had relocated to Chicago for a fresh start, according to Karen's industry connections, leaving behind both Denver and the mountain property debacle. By September, Horizon retreats neared completion. The interior designer I'd hired, Isabel Renard, had created spaces that balanced luxury with mindfulness, comfortable yet intentional environments that encouraged both relaxation and reflection. The color palette draws from the natural surroundings, Isabel explained as we toured the finished main lodge. Earth tones grounded in reality, with occasional jewel accents that inspire possibility. I approved her choices with genuine appreciation. Every element reflected the retreat's purpose, creating space for women to reconnect with themselves, assess their paths, and envision new possibilities. The inaugural retreat was scheduled for mid-October, with 12 participants, selected from applications that had surprised me with their volume and sincerity. Women from across the country, executives, entrepreneurs, creative professionals, all seeking a structured opportunity to reflect and reset. Many mentioned significant life transitions, career changes, relationship endings, health recoveries, that had prompted their interest in Horizon. The night before they arrived, I stood in the central courtyard as twilight faded to darkness. The compound glowed with warm light from iron lanterns, the buildings forming a protective circle around the stone-paved gathering space. From this vantage point, I could see the distant silhouette of Cabin 14, still unfinished and now officially listed for sale at a significant loss. Admiring your creation? Karen's voice broke into my thoughts as she joined me by the fire pit, 2 glasses of wine in hand. Just reflecting on the journey here, I replied, accepting the offered glass. 1 year ago, I could never have imagined this. Karen studied me with the perceptive gaze of a friend who had witnessed my entire transformation. When you discovered Mark's betrayal, I was terrified for you. I thought it would break you. The financial violation, the personal betrayal. Instead, you turned it into this. She gestured to the retreat complex around us, the structures harmoniously integrated with the mountain landscape. It wasn't a straight line from devastation to creation, I acknowledged. There were detours through anger and revenge that I'm not particularly proud of. Karen shook her head firmly. Don't diminish what you accomplished. You protected yourself when no one else would. You established consequences for betrayal. Those weren't detours. They were necessary steps in reclaiming your power. I sipped my wine, considering her perspective. Perhaps, but I'm grateful the journey continued beyond consequences to creation. That initial property purchase was reactive, a strategic move against Mark. Horizon Retreats is something else entirely, a vision that's wholly mine, independent of him or his actions. That's what I admire most, Karen said. You could have stopped at victory, having your mountain properties, winning the legal battles, securing a favorable divorce settlement. Many would have considered that enough. But you pushed beyond winning to creating something meaningful. The distinction resonated deeply. In the immediate aftermath of discovering Mark's betrayal, my focus had been on countermoves and protection. The transformation of those defensive acquisitions into a space dedicated to renewal and growth represented a fundamental shift in perspective, from responding to creating, from reaction to vision. Tomorrow, 12 women arrive seeking their own transformations, I noted, each with her own version of devastation or transition to navigate. With you as living proof that betrayal can be the beginning rather than the end, Karen added. Though perhaps save the "I bought 4 mountain properties to surround my cheating husband's love nest" story for the advanced seminar. I laughed, the sound echoing pleasantly in the courtyard. Definitely advanced material. The inaugural retreat exceeded all expectations. The 12 participants, diverse in age, background, and circumstance, formed an immediate connection through their shared desire for authentic reflection and renewal. The daily schedule balanced structured sessions with generous time for personal contemplation, guided activities with space for individual exploration. I led morning discussions in the main lodge, sharing principles of resilience and reinvention without explicitly detailing my own story. Karen facilitated afternoon workshops on practical rebounding strategies, while guest speakers addressed specific aspects of transition, financial independence, emotional processing, vision creation. On the retreat's final evening, we gathered around the courtyard fire pit for a closing ceremony. The women who had arrived as strangers 5 days earlier now formed a circle of mutual support, each having revealed vulnerabilities and strengths throughout their stay. Before we close, I said, the firelight illuminating attentive faces, I'd like to share something I haven't spoken about directly this week. You've all courageously shared your stories of disruption and transition. It seems only fair I share the origin story of Horizon Retreats itself. With the mountain night wrapped around us, I told them about discovering Mark's betrayal, about the emptied retirement account, and the cabin purchased for another woman. I explained my strategic acquisition of the surrounding properties, my position on the architectural committee, and the gradual evolution from reactive protection to creative vision. What began as a countermove became something entirely different, I concluded. These buildings around us, initially purchased to establish consequences for betrayal, transformed into spaces dedicated to renewal and possibility. That's the power we all possess, to take our moments of devastation and use them not just to recover, but to reinvent. The silence that followed felt sacred, filled with recognition and possibility. Then Ellen, an advertising executive rebuilding after a health crisis, raised her wine glass. To Emily, she said, voice steady with conviction, who showed us that the path forward isn't about returning to who we were before crisis struck, but becoming someone new entirely. As glasses rose around the circle, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with the devastating discovery of financial betrayal had culminated in this moment of connection and purpose. The emptied retirement account that had once symbolized theft and deception had led, through a winding path of determination and vision, to the creation of something far more valuable than money, a space where transformation was not just possible but inevitable. The success of the inaugural retreat led to immediate bookings for future sessions, with participants eager to spread the word among their networks. By December, Horizon Retreats had a waiting list extending through the following summer, with specialized programs developing for specific transition types: career reinvention, relationship rebuilding, health recovery. Sarah Martinez, who had witnessed the entire evolution from strategic property acquisition to thriving retreat center, became an unexpected ally in the business development. Mountain View Estates is considering a partnership proposal, she informed me during a pre-holiday meeting. They're interested in offering Horizon Retreats as an exclusive amenity for property owners, private sessions available only to residents and their guests, supplementing your regular retreat schedule. The proposal made good business sense, providing guaranteed income while expanding Horizon's reach. More significantly, it represented full-circle integration with the very development where my journey had begun. I'd be open to discussing terms, I agreed, though we'd need to maintain the integrity of the retreat experience. Sarah nodded her understanding. Thomas specifically mentioned that the authentic transformation aspect is central to the appeal. He's actually recommended Horizon to his sister, who's navigating a difficult divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me. The developer who had once sold property to Mark for his affair sanctuary now referred family members to the retreat center that had risen from that betrayal. Winter settled over the mountains, blanketing Horizon, in pristine snow that transformed the property into a serene wonderland. I had decided to schedule retreats year-round, recognizing that renewal wasn't seasonal. The winter landscape offered its own metaphors for transition: the quiet dormancy that preceded spring rebirth, the clarity of leafless trees revealing structural strength normally hidden. The December retreat focused on year-end reflection and New Year visioning, attracting participants seeking intentional transition between annual cycles. Among the applications I received was one that stopped me mid-review, the name immediately familiar: Heather Brooks. My first instinct was immediate rejection. The idea of welcoming Mark's former mistress into the space created from their betrayal seemed inconceivable. Yet something made me continue reading her application. My involvement in another woman's marriage devastated multiple lives, including my own, Heather had written with surprising candor. The relationship that I believed would bring fulfillment has instead brought profound regret and necessary self-examination. I need structured space to confront my own choices and establish a more ethical path forward. I set the application aside, unsure how to proceed. My immediate emotional response conflicted with the inclusive philosophy I'd established for Horizon. If the retreat truly existed to support women navigating difficult transitions, could I justify excluding someone based solely on our shared history? Karen, who had become my partner in managing retreat applications, offered her perspective when I shared the dilemma. "You've created a space dedicated to transformation," she noted. "Wouldn't excluding Heather contradict that purpose? Besides, her participation would be the ultimate testimony to your own transformation, from victim to facilitator of her growth." Her reasoning was sound, but the emotional reality remained complex. Could I truly facilitate Heather's reflection process objectively? Would her presence reactivate wounds I believed had healed? After considerable reflection, I made my decision. I approved Heather's application, but scheduled her for February's retreat rather than December's, giving myself additional time to prepare for our inevitable interaction. I also arranged for Karen to lead the sessions Heather would attend, positioning myself more as center director than direct facilitator during that particular retreat. The December and January retreats proceeded smoothly, each group of women departing with renewed clarity and connection. As February approached, I found myself surprisingly calm about Heather's upcoming attendance. The woman who had once symbolized betrayal and loss now registered primarily as another person navigating her own complicated path. When the February participants arrived, I greeted each at the main lodge entrance, including Heather. The recognition was immediate in her eyes, widening briefly before she composed herself with visible effort. "Ms. Brooks," I acknowledged with professional courtesy. "Welcome to Horizon Retreats." "Ms. Thompson," she replied, her voice steady despite obvious discomfort. "I appreciate you accepting my application. I wasn't certain you would." "Horizon exists for women seeking authentic transformation," I said simply. "Your application suggested that's what you're here for." She nodded, maintaining eye contact despite the awkwardness. "It is, genuinely." "Then you're in the right place. Your room is in the East Wing. The welcome reception begins in the main lodge in 30 minutes. As she collected her room key and followed the retreat assistant to her accommodations, I felt a surprising absence of animosity. The emotional charge I had anticipated simply wasn't there. Heather Brooks was now just another participant seeking guidance through a difficult transition, her connection to my past rendered largely irrelevant by the fullness of my present. During the retreat, I maintained professional distance while observing Heather's participation. She engaged earnestly in the sessions, volunteering difficult truths about her choices and their consequences, gradually forming connections with Other participants through shared vulnerability rather than shared circumstances. On the retreat's final morning, as participants enjoyed a meditation session led by Karen, Heather approached me in the administrative office. "I wanted to speak with you privately before departing," she began, her composure more authentic than when she'd arrived. "To express my gratitude, but also my apology." I set aside the scheduling document I'd been reviewing. "An apology isn't necessary as part of your retreat experience." "It isn't for the retreat," she clarified. "It's for my role in violating your marriage and financial partnership." I understood Mark was unhappy, but I never questioned the resources he was using to build our supposed future. "I participated in the theft of your security without considering the human impact. That deserves acknowledgement and genuine regret." The directness of her statement was unexpected but appreciated. "Thank you for that recognition," I replied. "May I ask what prompted this particular reflection?" Heather gestured toward the retreat center around us. "This place? When I applied, I knew it was connected to the properties surrounding Cabin 14, but I didn't understand the full story until the development discussion yesterday. You transformed a devastating betrayal into something that helps others navigate their own crises. Meanwhile, I'm still untangling the consequences of choices I made when I prioritized my desires over ethical considerations." There was no self-pity. In her assessment, simply honest recognition. I found myself respecting her willingness to confront her role without deflection. "Transformation isn't a competition," I observed. "We all move through it at different paces and in different ways. The important part is committing to the process." She nodded, absorbing this. "Mark never did, commit to the process. When things got difficult with the cabin construction, when the reality didn't match his fantasy, he simply looked for someone to blame rather than examining his own choices. That pattern made me reevaluate everything about our relationship." I wasn't surprised by this assessment of Mark's character. It aligned perfectly with what I'd observed during our marriage and divorce. Still, hearing it confirmed by the woman he'd left me for carried a certain validation. "Self-reflection isn't comfortable," I acknowledged. "It's often easier to construct narratives where we're the heroes or victims rather than complicated humans making flawed choices." "I've been doing that work here this week," Heather said. "And I wanted you to know that creating this space, allowing someone who harmed you to benefit from your vision, that's remarkable grace." After she left, I sat with our conversation, recognizing the final piece of my own healing falling into place. My journey had never been about Mark, or even Heather. It had been about reclaiming agency after betrayal, discovering capacity beyond what I'd previously imagined, and ultimately creating something meaningful from devastation. Spring arrived in the mountains with dramatic beauty, melting snow revealing tender new growth, longer days illuminating possibilities previously hidden in winter shadow. Horizon Retreats had completed 6 successful sessions, each one refining our approach and strengthening our impact. I had fully transitioned from summit marketing to running the retreat center full-time, finding greater fulfillment in facilitating others' transformations than I'd ever experienced in corporate success. Karen and I stood on the main lodge deck one April morning, reviewing plans for summer programming while enjoying the mountain vista. "We should consider expanding," Karen suggested, indicating the property adjacent to our compound. Ironically, the still unsold Cabin 14. That would give us capacity for individual coaching spaces and a dedicated dining facility. I studied the property thoughtfully. The cabin construction had stalled completely after Heather's withdrawal, the partially built structure standing as a monument to abandoned dreams and failed visions. The developer had significantly reduced the asking price after months without serious offers, the compromised design and troubled history making it unattractive to luxury buyers. "It would complete the compound," I agreed, "and the price has dropped below market value given the construction issues." Plus, Karen added with a hint of mischief, there would be a certain poetic justice in transforming the very property meant for their affair into additional space for women's empowerment. I laughed at her framing, but the idea resonated beyond symbolism. The acquisition made practical business sense. Horizon's success warranted expansion, and incorporating the adjacent property would create a more cohesive campus while solving the eyesore problem of the abandoned construction. I'll contact Sarah about making an offer, I decided. A reasonable one that acknowledges the construction issues while recognizing its value to our existing investment. 2 weeks later, I signed the purchase agreement for Cabin 14, acquiring the property for 40% below its original price. The developer accepted my offer without negotiation, relieved to resolve the troubled project that had become a blemish on the otherwise thriving development. "What will you do with it?" Sarah asked as we completed the paperwork. "Finish the existing structure or start fresh?" I had given this considerable thought in the intervening days. Neither, actually. We're going to repurpose it as a garden pavilion and reflection space, removing the roof and some walls while retaining the foundation and key structural elements, a symbolic opening up of what was intended to be closed and exclusive. Sarah smiled at the concept. "Another transformation. You're making quite a habit of those." "It's what Horizon specializes in," I replied, finding potential in the aftermath of disruption. The Garden Pavilion project began immediately, with completion targeted for summer solstice, a fitting symbolic date for the final transformation of property, once representing betrayal into space dedicated to growth and possibility. On solstice evening, I hosted a small gathering for the Horizon team and key supporters who had witnessed its evolution. The former Cabin 14 had been artfully converted into an open-air sanctuary, with trellises replacing walls and climbing roses beginning their journey up stone columns. What had been designed as a private love nest was now an airy community space where retreat participants could journal, meditate, or simply absorb the mountain beauty in contemplative solitude. As twilight settled over the mountains, I raised a glass to the gathered circle. A year ago, I stood on this property trying to calculate how best to protect myself from betrayal, how to establish consequences for theft and deception. I never imagined standing here now, celebrating not just recovery, but complete reinvention. Karen, who had been present for every step of the journey, added her perspective. Emily transformed betrayal into opportunity, protection into creation. Horizon Retreats exists because she refused to let devastation be the end of her story. "To new beginnings," Thomas Calloway offered, raising his glass. As the developer who had witnessed the entire saga from Mark's initial purchase through my strategic acquisitions to the current thriving retreat center, his appreciation seemed particularly meaningful. "And to the unexpected paths that lead us to them," I added. As conversation flowed around me, I took a moment to absorb the completion of this particular circle. The property that Mark had purchased with our stolen retirement funds, intended as an escape from our marriage into a new life with another woman, had instead become the final piece in my own reinvention. The foundation meant for their exclusive sanctuary now supported an open space dedicated to reflection and growth. My grandmother's wisdom echoed in my memory. A smart woman always has her own money. Always. Her foresight in teaching me financial independence had saved me from devastation when betrayal came. But the lesson had expanded far beyond finances through this journey. Independence of thought, of vision, of purpose had proven equally valuable. The emptied retirement account that had once represented such devastating betrayal now seemed like a necessary disruption, the catalyst that had propelled me from comfortable complacency into creative possibility. Without that painful discovery, I might never have found the strength, determination, and vision that had created Horizon Retreats. As darkness settled over the mountains, the retreat compound glowed with warm light, each building serving its unique purpose within our mission of transformation. Women from across the country would continue arriving here, each carrying her own version of disruption or transition, each seeking space to process, reflect, and envision new possibilities. They would find not just beautiful accommodations and thoughtful programming, but living proof that devastation could be a beginning rather than an ending. That betrayal could lead to discovery. That an emptied account could ultimately reveal resources far more valuable than money. Resilience, determination, and the courage to build something entirely new from the ruins of what was lost. Up next, you've got two more standout stories. Right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.